Happy Easter, everyone! Yes, I say Happy Easter despite the fact that Easter is already over. During the Easter break, I was taking a break, so I didn't film anything. Sorry. And yes, I say Happy Easter, everyone! Despite the fact that you might be a Hindu or a Jew or a Muslim or a non-believer. That's because I think that Easter, while having a specific Christian meaning obviously, also holds 2 or 3 universal meanings, I think. If you want to know why, welcome to Easter, Christmas, Thanksgiving, and the importance of astronomy. Before I explain the universal meaning of Easter, I'd like to first briefly say what it actually means for Christianity. I tricked you. Did you really believe I would go straight to the point? No. First I have to explain something about Thanksgiving.
Number 1. Thanksgiving.
I think it doesn't matter where you live in the world, but Hollywood is probably omnipresent. Okay, there is Bollywood, and people around the world start to realize that it exists, despite the fact that it is the biggest cinema market in the world. Recently, I also learned that there is Nollywood, which is the Nigerian film industry, which apparently is also quite booming, and I think they make films not just for Nigeria, but for a huge part of Black Africa too. And still, I have the impression that it doesn't really matter where you live in the world, except maybe in North Korea, although I think even North Korea, people know Hollywood films, and in general television productions and cinema productions from the United States. And as such, everyone has at some point come across Thanksgiving. And that's where I had a problem for a long time. I didn't know which Christian festivity that is. You know, I was born in Poland, lived in Poland until the age of 7, then we moved to Germany, so I had the occasion to realize that despite both countries having a Christian background, religious festivities were not the same. The very same day could be a bank holiday in one country and not in the other. As well, the relative importance of a festivity could be very different. And also the celebrations themselves, how the holiday would look like, would also differ. For instance, Polish Christmas looks significantly different than German Christmas, and the same is true for Easter. But in 2 regards, there were no differences between the countries. When there was a Christian festivity in Poland, there was also a Christian festivity in Germany. No surprise, it's the same Christian religion after all. So you had the same date, and you also had, you always knew what the corresponding name was in the given country. But when it comes to Thanksgiving, I didn't really know. I never heard anything about it in Poland, and it also wasn't celebrated in Germany. And I didn't really know what the corresponding name is. And even if I knew, then at least I wouldn't know when the hell is it happening. I'm a little embarrassed to admit how late it was when I realized that Thanksgiving, first of all, is not a Christian festivity. And secondly, it's US specific. Let me explain why I thought it was a Christian festivity. Thanks to Hollywood and US films, I saw that usually people would, the family would gather around the table, and they would pretty much always eat the same thing. I mean, always a turkey, and usually they would pray. So it looked exactly like what I knew from Christian holidays. There is a certain kind of food that you eat usually, and you have prayers. I wouldn't expect people to pray on a non-Christian holiday, and yet that's what's happening during Thanksgiving. But why do I even mention Thanksgiving? Well, it's because of its cultural relevance. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I have the impression that in the United States, Thanksgiving is actually even more important than Christmas. And that was very surprising to me because I thought that in any country that's having a Christian influence, the most important holiday is Christmas. And that's where the connection is to Easter. I was surprised to realize at some point that Christmas is not the most important celebration, the most important festivity in Christianity. It's Easter, at least from a theological point of view. Now, wait, some of you will say, how come you didn't know? Why did you think that Christmas is the most important festivity? Well, let me explain that briefly too.
Number 2. Christmas.
Now, if you're an English native speaker, you might even deduct it from the language. I mean, if it's Christianity, then Christmas is the most important festivity.
Christmas.
What?
You don't pronounce the T.
It's not Christmas, it's Christmas. You mean like crisscross? Okay, time out. Okay. English native speakers, why have you done this? If it's Jesus Christ, why isn't this Christianity? And why isn't it Christmas? No. It's Christ, but it's Christmas and it's Christianity. You really don't make it easier to learn your language. Okay, but back to the relevance of Christianity. Why did I think that Christmas is the most important festivity? Well, I would say, first of all, as a child, presents. You know, Christmas as the holiday where you receive presents obviously makes it the most important festivity for a child. And as long as you are the person who always receives and isn't the one who buys the present. But having a holiday whose main characteristic is receiving presents is such a strong image that Christmas even transpires into religions which have absolutely no understanding of what Christmas is about, theologically. But surprise, surprise, theologically, Christmas is not the most important festival of Christianity. It is actually Easter. But in order to explain that, we have to go back in time 2,000 years when Christianity was nothing more but a little Jewish sect in a world where there were predominantly polytheistic religions.
Number 3. Easter.
Have you ever realized that Greek paganism was actually a very sad religion? As a normal human, you had no outlook for a positive afterlife. It didn't matter if you have been a good person or a bad person. Everyone goes to Hades. Many people equate Hades with hell, but that's wrong. Hell is where you go when you have been a bad person. If you have been a good person, you will go to heaven, at least eventually, after the purgatory. Although recently the church announced that the purgatory doesn't exist and that there is no foundation in the Bible to claim that it does. But anyhow, bad people, hell, good people, heaven. Hades, however, is where everybody goes. Every mortal eventually ends up there and then has an afterlife as a shadow. Tartarus, that's the best correspondence to hell, because that's the place within Hades where those people go who have been wicked. So if you wonder where you would find Sisyphus, who is, pushing a rock up a hill, and every time when he's almost at the top, the rock will eventually roll down the hill again. Or if you wonder where you would find Tantalus, who has water up to his chin and grapes right in front of his face, and who's extremely hungry and thirsty, but whenever he bends down to drink, the water disappears and there's only dry ground, and whenever he tries to grab the grapes, they disappear upwards and he's unable to eat them. Both people you would find in Tartarus. But that doesn't change the fact that even if you lived a virtuous life, you will end up in Hades, and it's a miserable existence. And we know that because there were people which ventured into Hades and they had the chance to speak, for instance, even to great heroes who would say, well, yeah, can't eat, can't drink, can't enjoy physical life. It's just a shadow, and that's how it's going to be for ever. Long story short, Greek religion didn't really give you anything to look forward to in the afterlife. And that's how most religions were at that time. I mean, yes, I recently read about a so-called Gnostic cult in ancient Greece, which promised an afterlife. But this was rather an exception to the rule. The overall and commonly accepted vision was that when you die, you go to Hades. Unless you are lucky and are born a demigod, like Heracles, for instance. But even Heracles, he had to burn himself at the stake before he ascended to, well, not heaven, but to the Olymp. Yeah, the Olymp was not a place where you would go if you lived a virtuous life. It was a place reserved for gods. So you can imagine that if you have a religion which says, if you are a part of this cult, you will not die. There is an afterlife for you, and it's an afterlife that's worth looking forward to. Then you have a very attractive religion. Now you might think, okay, so that should have made Judaism an extremely popular religion, at least in the Middle East, right? But that didn't happen. Why? Well, the reason is that Judaism is a ethnically hermetic religion. You have probably all heard about the covenant with God. The covenant with God is a bilateral treaty between the Israelites on the one hand and Yahweh on the other. The interesting thing is that it's a mutually exclusive treaty. If you ever wondered why in the Bible, in the first commandment, it says, "You shall have no other gods beside me," and not, "There are no other gods beside me," the reason is that the original Judaistic religion was not monotheistic. In the original Judaistic religion, the belief was not that there are no other gods, but that the Israelites struck a deal with this particular God. The Israelites have forfeit their right to worship any other gods. Now, from the perspective of the original Israelites, this was a very important sacrifice. You know, different gods could prove powerful in different contexts. You would pray to certain gods for one purpose and to other gods for another. Also, the luck may be changing. Also, why not worship like all of them? You know, that's what the Romans, for instance, did. In Rome, there was even literally a temple for the unknown god, just in case. And here we have the Israelites who say, okay, we will only worship this one God. Why would you do that? The reason is because this God agreed to make a covenant only with the Israelites. And now it starts to make sense. I mean, if you have a God that will support only you, okay, you may have bad luck and maybe he's weaker than the god of another side, but just imagine you and your enemies would be worshipping the same god and both sides would say God is on our side. Such an absurd idea. Never mind. Anyhow, the core element of Judaism was the limitation to the Hebrews. It's that reason why this religion never really spread. Well, with one notable exception. Well, maybe there are more, but I know of one exception. The Chazars, they have chosen to adopt Judaism. It was a very interesting story. So one of their leaders decided to introduce one of those monotheistic religions, and he compared Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And despite the fact that Christianity and Islam were the two big religions of that time, he came to the conclusion that Judaism is the way to go. But otherwise, Judaism remains the religion of the Hebrews/Israelites/Jews and didn't really spread beyond those ethnic borders. And that's where Christianity is different. Because one of the core messages of Christianity is to go to all peoples, spread the news. There is hope for every one of us. We can all have a happy afterlife if only you convert to this religion. That was a tremendously powerful message, which was one of the engines behind the spread of Christianity. There is one problem though. Anyone could claim that. Do you have a proof? That's why Easter was so important. You know, it doesn't really matter that much that Jesus Christ was born at a certain point. The Middle East of the time when Christianity appeared was full of cults where there were demigods that have been born. I mean, I already mentioned Heracles. That's not the big deal. The big deal is that Jesus Christ announced,
"I'll be back."
And that he then actually did come back. I think we've got the wrong clip. That's the big news. Overcoming death. Well, let me express it in terms of marketing. Many people don't know it and assume that when Christianity appeared in the Roman Empire, everybody was worshipping Greco-Roman gods. But that's not true. In fact, there was a huge competition of many different religions, some originating from the Roman Empire, some from abroad. Within the Roman Empire, apart from the classic heathen cults like the Greek and Roman gods and the Egyptian gods and so on, you also had other cults, some of them originating outside the borders of the empire. You had Zoroastrianism, the Mithras cult and Sol Invictus and many other cults that were competing with each other. On this strongly competitive theological marketplace, Jesus Christ dying and then coming back to life was Christianity's strongest selling point. That's why Easter is the most important festivity of Christianity.